Welcome to episode 95 of the Trading Without Borders podcast with Omobi, your host. If this is your first time of listening to the podcast, I will introduce myself briefly. So my name is Omobola Adekola, speaking to you from Lagos, Nigeria. So today I say to you, Ekabo, Sanu, Kedu, Abari, and I will share the meaning of what I've just said to you. Ekabo is Yoruba language from the southwestern parts of Nigeria. So I'm saying welcome from the southwestern part of Nigeria. Then Kedu is how are you? That's from the southeastern part of Nigeria. And Sanu is also hello from the northern part of Nigeria. That's the Hausa language from the northern part of Nigeria. And Habari, that's Swahili, also saying hello to you. And I will say to you, Asante Sana, that is, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast or for listening to the Trading Without Borders podcast. Just to reiterate, Kedu is the Igbo language from the southeastern part of Nigeria. So I just had to talk about Kedu again because I realized I just mentioned that from the southeastern part. So that's Igbo language. So moving on. For today, we will continue our discussions on the progressive realization of the free movement protocol. So I started discussions on progressive realization of free movement of persons, right of residence, and rights of establishment. And I mentioned that there are three phases in which it should be realized. And so before we go on, for the people that are listening for the first time, so the protocol on free movement within Africa, yes, it's not been implemented in most cases, but I've just been trying to share with listeners on the podcast what that protocol is about, and also share reports on the visa openness index or visa openness report, and that's been prepared. That was for 2023, which is an initiative of the African Development Bank and African Union Commission, just to see what's and what. Yes, we've been talking about AFCFTA, but just like a lot of people share the sentiment, if we don't have free movements within Africa, then how do we achieve this successful AFCFTA free trade area? So I just decided that, okay, let me just share that there's some sort of discussions or some adoption of the free movement protocol, even if yet it's not been implemented or some states have adopted it. And let me just share what that is about, and let's see how far and how successful we have gone within Africa in respect of people moving around within Africans moving around within Africa, able to visit other African states. Moving on, let's look at what it says about entry in member states. When will entry in member states be permitted? It says when a person is entering the member state through a designated point or official port of entry through a recognized and valid travel document. The person is also not permitted based on security, not prohibited from entering that state based on security reason, public order, or public health reasons. That is what it is. So going on, also adds provision for designated or official points of entry and exit. Protocol makes provision for member states to share with other member states information about official entry and exit point. It also makes provisions for travel documents to be issued to facilitate free movement. So let me move on to the African passport, another provision. What does that say? What's under the provision for African passport? It says that state parties are to adopt a travel document called African passport and shall work closely with the Commission to facilitate the processes towards the issuance of this passport to their citizens. So basically, there's a provision to adopt a passport. And first, for some of us, if you are within the ECOWAS countries, we have an ECOWAS passport that we use to move around within ECOWAS, really. And so in this case, it's saying a continental passport, African passport that all Africans can easily use to move around as well. It also goes on to make provision that the passport shall be based on international, continental, and national policy provision and standards and on a continental design and specifications. So I just thought to mention that briefly. The Act also makes provisions for use of vehicles, allowing nationals of other member states to move their vehicles within the territory, and that's for a maximum period of 90 days from the date of entry upon presentation of valid documents. Some of those documents are a driver's license, evidence of ownership or registration of the vehicle, certificate of roadworthiness, certificate of axle load limits, and an insurance policy in respect of the vehicle by the host member states. So let's move on and quickly look at free movement of students and researchers. So the protocol also makes provisions for state parties to permit nationals of other member states holding registration or pre-registration document to take up education or research in their territory. Of course, that's subject to the policy and laws of those member states, and they are to issue student permits or passes to nationals of all those members who are admitted to pursue studies in the host member states. Okay, and let me also look at free movement of workers. So nationals of a member state shall have the right to seek and accept employment without discrimination in any other member state in accordance with the laws and policies of the host member state. And a national of a member state that accepts and takes up employment in another member state may be accompanied by a spouse and dependents. So you can take up employment. You can also be accompanied on such with your spouse and your dependents. And finally, let's just look at permits or passes. The provisions on permits or passes, it says that all states shall issue residence permits, work permits, or other appropriate permits or passes to nationals of other member states seeking and taking up residence or work in the host member state. The permits or passes are to be issued in accordance with the immigration procedures that is applicable in the host member states, and also there's also provision for another member state to appeal against a decision. That means the national of another member state has the right to appeal. You can appeal against a decision denying them a permit or pass into that territory. This is where I will stop for today. So I've not shared any report about the visa openness index today. So next week I will focus more on that as well, looking at ease in travel for Africans, the indicator, the first indicator, the second indicator, and the third indicator. So we'll focus on that more, the visa openness report next week. As usual, the podcast is for educational purposes only. If you want to discuss more about trading within other African countries, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Omobola Adekola. So, and in introducing myself earlier, I didn't say what I do. So I am a lawyer and I'm also an international trade advisor. So if you want to speak more, like I said, about trading within other African countries, that African trade, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can also send me a message via the list here as well. And until next week, I will say to you, bye-bye. And thank you all for listening.